it's springtime. It's getting to that time for springtime. It's getting to that point in consciousness as well as practice. So what does that time of the year symbolize? It's really, getting the final bits of the past, which means winter, cold, but also the past. That which is the darker, introverted time. A greater level of goodbye to that. So by all means, make sure that you do your best to say, are there any residual bits, any residual lessons, any residual hurts? I do not want to really, I choose not to take this into my life for another year, another, whatever it happens to be, another, millennium for that matter. But rather, it's time to let that go to a new level. So some closures. This thing called spring cleaning is actually that we come to eventually in our lives. Spring cleaning, some people, know of that. Some never even bother doing it. It's very healthy. It's a very healthy ritual to say, I'm not going to carry the stuff of the past into the new life. But springtime is also about getting the final bits of the inspirations so that I can bring them into summer and full fruition. So the universe has its cycles. Nature has its cycles. The earth has its cycles. We live in a symbiotic relationship with all this. So we too have our cycles, various types, biorhythms and whatever else. All kinds of cycles. One of them, the simplest one to keep track of and be able to see, is that with nature. Just kind of stay in the groove. When nature is saying it's time to let go, let's just let go. Let's just get into the groove and do that. It's easier to do it. You can do it any time, but it's easier to do it when the cycles are supporting that particular vibe. So it's a great time to kind of, greater closure so that I can prepare for the greatest version of spring, and then spring forward, come to life and get ready. Now, does that mean if I haven't really completed my healing or if I haven't really come to some inspirations for spring that I'm going to kind of lose out? No, not necessarily. But it would take mastery. It would take consciousness and intention and focus to help make up for any, complacencies that we've allowed to get the best of us, right? So we can still pull it off at any time of the year. You can just go, well, I kind of missed the preparation, but I'm not going to miss everything entirely. I'm going to step up and go for this. And then it works. It's always easier, however, to do it while in the groove. So some folks had asked today about a couple of specific questions that came in that were consistent with each other. So I'm going to summarize those. They gave them to me just a few minutes back. And one of them was asking, about new energies. There's a lot of new frequencies, a lot of new energy. I'm not going to go into deep specifics about it at this point. But yes, there's a new world arising. Just like we can feel springtime coming. You can feel that winter is kind of gone. And every so often you'll feel a coolness in the air that feels like, wow, there's a little bit of that. That's just like life. When it feels like we're moving definitely towards spring, especially if you live in very cold climates, it's a real breath of fresh air to think, wow, spring's finally coming. And then another couple weeks of real cold comes a few weeks later. Surprises us, but that's part of life. It's a drag. It's an inconvenience, but we should ask ourselves why it's happening. Well, if nature said we needed a couple more weeks of coolness, I guess it must be a reflection of we need to do a little more inner work. Now, if we just sit around going, dang it, I don't like this weather, and kind of get bummed out, we actually are missing key opportunities to be different. So while we're in it, let's do the greatest we can. While we're in it, let's clear and cleanse. But the world is showing us that there is, definitely something happening globally. And it's on an unconscious level. You can try and name the changes. You can try and say, well, we're noticing electromagnetic fields are changing, and that's kind of cool. You can name things that are even less perceptible, like I'm noticing a higher vibration. My meditations are really having phenomenal results. That's very cool. Some of it palpable, some of it not. But there's definitely still a movement. Whether you're aware of it or not, whether you're into it or not, whether you like or don't like what you see in the world, it doesn't matter. It's still happening. And we can either get on board or we can just bemoan that it's not happening exactly the way we would like to think it should. But something's happening. Frequencies are changing. There's a whole consciousness changing. Electromagnetic field of the earth is changing, which means the one in our body is changing because we're in a symbiotic relationship with the earth. The ego, however, has different ideas and different plans. Call it evil, call it the evils of the world, call it the ego, call it anything you want. But the part of us that fears God, the part of us that fears our light, that fears an awakening, is trying to slow all that down or even get it to reverse. You can't reverse it. And trying to delay it or reverse it only causes more aggravation or anxiety. You know, people say to me, how come I get these pulsations of energy and sometimes they jolt my body? The jolting is not the intention. You know, and some people get that. They get a tension in a muscle, or they get a spine kind of ache when they meditate. That is not the goal of energy coming into our lives. Those jolts and all those things, even when you get an ache when you try to meditate, all that's happening is you're activating energy. It's coming through, which is great news. Something's happening, and it gets caught somewhere that's not open. So is the problem the energy, or is it where I am not open? You see? So that's why masters of old used to say, you know, stretch, get the spine aligned, stretch, open up the body so that energy can more easily flow through. And even then you might still feel an ache and a twitch. Just see it, just feel it and move into it. Does that make sense? Like in yoga, just do micro adjustments into it. Just kind of open up, feel, let that unlock, and just kind of move with it. It's almost like a spontaneous movement, sometimes very subtle, and sometimes very dramatic in the body, but just follow it, just open. That's all that's happening. In a way that people that have had really extreme visions with spirit of some form, they go into states of ecstasy. Their bodies fold in half in ways that shouldn't, backwards. They're able to, you know, experience, they've tried experiments, they can prick them and burn them, and they don't feel any of it because they're in an altered state. So we can have all kinds of things happen as a part of our spiritual awakening. One thing's for sure, it's not typical. It's not normal to have these things. So you can be sitting in a group, you know, and suddenly have these waves of energy come through you. And we think, you know, when people see that, they think, oh, you know, I think maybe something's wrong with that person. And mind you, of course, it's a little weird to some people, to their eyes. But the more we allow it to happen, the less it would become a compulsion that overtakes us during odd moments. You know, you're at a funeral and suddenly you start having all these bizarre jolts and shakes, you know. Your children's birthday party, all their kids are going to be like, wow, what's wrong with your mom? Oh, it's just spirit. You know, it's hard to explain those things to mainstream people. But if we get prayerful and we learn to say, you know, I'm good with this, but I do insist that it happen in appropriate times. It's okay. You can guide that. You can also help it to happen in times when it's totally okay and easy. Then it won't build up as much and happen at, you know, seemingly inconvenient times. But there are new energies and they're trying to move through the body. This body that we have is not the same one we're going to see, even just a couple generations from now. Believe it or not, it's happening very quickly. Lots of new things downloading. And my attitude is, really try not to define it too much. Just keep unfolding, unwinding. Let the tensions, the blocks, whatever they happen to be, let them unwind. Because when I see what's happening and I kind of adjust to it and kind of open to it, you do understand that this is a metaphor for consciousness shifts. When the body shifts, when you have to open up the body and the joints and muscles and the spine and learn to breathe, when you're doing that, it's a metaphor for saying, this is really my mind that's shifting, not my body. The body's just going to go along for the ride. So don't just make it a body-centered experience, and don't interpret me as speaking about a body-centered experience. The body is involved, but it's not centered on the body. Consciousness is changing. So the more I stay away from defining it, then I'm not defining my mind. If I say I would like half my rib cage to open up to new energies, but not the other half, it makes no sense. So you let it happen. You let it happen. Well, this part's a little achy. Well, then just drop into it, relax, and just try to let it unwind to the best of your ability. Don't label it. Don't constrict around it, because then what will happen is everything will follow that choice. I refuse to go any further with this becomes, okay, spirit, all the beings, all the masters, your angels that are helping you say, everybody stop, let's lock it right there and let them be for a while. And now I'm kind of going to feel stuck in terms of my consciousness shifts and in terms of my energetic and physiological and anatomical shifts I'm going to feel kind of stuck. I'm going to look at the world and go, wow, I started having some changes, but now other people are having lots, and I don't feel like I'm having many anymore. And that's because we somewhere got afraid and locked it down. So, you know, there's this whole, just trying to imagine this whole symbiotic relationship. And if the earth is changing in her frequency, then we are as well, because we're in that relationship. As I said, though, the ego's afraid, and it has parasitic relationships rather than symbiotic. Parasitic, very different. It's survival of the fittest. It's to each his own. It's fear, constant fear. Something's happening, it doesn't like it, because if we change, the ego, if we change, and the ego obviously isn't going to like that, it's going to try to incite fear in us so that we shut down and lock down. So the more, all we have to do is the simplest thing of just see it's happening, take a couple breaths, and just try to drop into whatever's happening, whether it's emotional, physical, physiological, anatomical, whatever, energetic. Just simplest thing. Keep practicing to drop right into it. And I want to say, you know, these changes that are coming to the world, they include changes in relationships, and they include changes in spiritual teachings. So briefly, if I might, here's a couple of really cool things to keep in mind. Mankind is awakening. We're totally awakening, but everything's shifting. Two dramatic places, besides the body and all, relationships and even spiritual teachings are going to change and keep changing. They're going to keep changing. You're not going to be able to go back and study the way you did 10, 20 years ago, if you studied at all. It's not going to be the old school. Everything's changing. And one of the most dramatic things about spiritual teachings that are going to change is the teachers and the students, all alike, equally, have to become what they're teaching and reading. We can't just study it and go, well, that was neat. Yeah, I took this course. It was, you know, it was great. It was a 10-week course. I took a 5-day intensive. I meditated for 6 days straight. None of that's going to matter like it once did to us, because that was just foundational work. We're still supposed to become what we've read. And I've been about that most of my, years. It's about integrating those teachings. It's a very sad thing when people don't, because that's an accident waiting to happen. When we go through challenges and tests in life, we go, God, why are these tests, why are these challenges happening? We can say, the Christians will say, Satan is testing me. Other people will say, my ego. We have different names for it, but why is it even happening? It's only ever happening to show us where we have not yet integrated a higher consciousness. Which is kind of, well, that's an inconvenience. Yep, oh well. Remember, the planet Saturn is where we also get the name Satan from, or in Egyptian mythology, Set. Set, Satan, Saturn, they're all the same. But if you look at it astrologically, you don't go, oh my God, there's this one evil planet. I wish we could get rid of it. Saturn will only, Satan, ego, darkness, shadow, will only ever be bringing to you, exaggerations of your stuff so that you can see where you haven't gotten it yet. And primarily when we say we haven't gotten it, it doesn't mean you failed to read an extra page of a book. It always only means it's showing us where we haven't yet integrated something we've learned or could have learned. We haven't yet integrated forgiveness. The reason resentments come back and bite you is because we haven't yet completely integrated forgiveness, right? All these things that come to us, and evil visited upon, a curse visited upon this village. There's no curse that actually it's not like there's a curse in the desert going, I don't have anything to do. Oh, let's go visit upon a village. Curses don't get visited upon a person or a village. All it is ever old stuff. Earth can have a little region of its own karmic energy that something didn't get resolved. People left dark experiences there. So it sits there and it needs resolved. Which is why some masters go and do blessings and heal a house from that energy. But still, it's always only unhealed coming up to be healed, which is not necessarily a negative thing. And a good astrologer should be able to explain that more thoroughly about Saturn. And if they tell you Saturn's evil and then I would just see a different astrologer. Okay. So the new relationships, I'll come back to the spiritual stuff in a sec, but the new relationships, there's something happening. One of the most important things for us to get really clear is primarily there's two kinds of relationships. karmic relationships and gifting relationships. And most of us have karmic relationships. Most of our relationships are karmic. And that could include your family of origin. You know, you might have had a really great gifting family of origin, and that would be cool. That means you must have done some work and with those people to attract or create that level of support and love, and it's worth congratulating. Giving thanks, absolutely give thanks for it. Don't take it for granted. Give thanks for it. But it could be your family of origin, and if not there, then the family you create as an adult, you know, your own partner, your own children or whatever, that's still another family. And most of those are still karmic, which is why a lot of us, you know, the relationships don't last very long in a lot of cases. Because people think, well, you know what? I have a choice. I can work on whatever's causing these problems in my relationships, or I can just get rid of them and get someone else. And usually people tend to just get rid of the last partner and get someone else. But, you know, wherever you go, there you are. So you can't actually just divorce somebody and say, Your Honor, you know, I'm going to ask to now part ways, get a divorce. I'd like you to sign off on this, because with that person goes all my issues out the door. You know, I mean, it doesn't work that way. With you goes all your issues, in you, as you, anything what? That you haven't yet completed. I'm not saying you're fated to have issues. I'm saying, did you complete them while in that relationship? So most of the time, our adult families are really just reliving stuff that we didn't resolve in our childhood families, our family of origin. What I didn't do in past lives will come up as my family today. What I didn't do with my family of today, meaning family of origin, will come up in my new family. And when I get old enough to get rid of them, it'll just be my latest partner. The stuff is going to keep recycling, because there's karmic relationships and there's gifting. You can't buy a gifting one. I can't have a workshop and say, how to manifest gifting relationships overnight. Just $99. It doesn't work. You can't actually just get one. They have to be earned. How? By the work you've done on the challenging karmic relationships. That's all. I'm not even going to say, unless, no, there is no other thing. There's no easy way to say it other in a different way. Our gifting relationships only come from the work we've done with the challenging karmic relationships. So some people say, well, I've had some really great gifting. Good job. And give thanks for those people, and give thanks that you were there. Consciousness, you know, was there to create that. But what about the people that say, I haven't had many gifting relationships? There's no fate from the heavens. There's no God that's cursing you. If you don't have gifting relationships, it's only ever because I haven't yet completed enough work on myself to move in that direction, to manifest more gifting relationships. So if it's not cleared, if it's not happening gifting, then I have to own that there might be some karmic relationships here and there. I mean, I'd like to say that there's another reason. It was an accident of the universe, but it isn't. And you didn't catch, you know, Michael, I'm here for a session. Can you confirm for me that maybe I accidentally caught my neighbor's karmic relationships? You know, it actually, no, it doesn't work that way. You can only ever manifest reflections of self. I know that that's not easy to hear, and I know that can seem a bit like a bummer, you know. It can even depress you if you think, well, I don't like hearing this because it sounds a bit fatalistic, you know. Where's my gifts? I see other people that have gifting relationships, and I as a teacher can say that. I as a teacher can say, I've done lots of work, I've done lots of healing, I've helped a lot of people, good karma, all this, but I'm still going to see karmic stuff come around now and again, you know. And why wouldn't we? Well, because the spiritual teacher shouldn't even have karma anymore. That doesn't even make sense. Even if I'm on earth, the fact that I'm on earth will show that there's some pieces of something to work on. But even then, even if I did attain a level of consciousness where I feel like I don't have a lot of karma, I don't have a lot of karmic relationships, let's say you pull that off, still you're part of a collective. So you're going to have a choice, let's say. Well, listen, Michael, or whomever, Spirit comes to us and says, you've done a great job. You've really cleared a lot of your stuff. So you can go to the other side and bliss out you know, at hotel heaven in the astral plane. Or you can say to yourself, well, I'm still part of everyone and they're still struggling, so why don't I just hang around and do my best to help the collective rise in its consciousness? And that's actually a very high choice. It's an amazing choice. A Course in Miracles says those people that do that are called the saints of God. Because instead of just going, well, I can't wait till I clear my stuff, man, because these people are freakazoids. I want out of here. You know, I just want out of here. I just want to clear my karma and then say goodbye to these people. Well, that's okay, because if you do clear it, it's authentic. You feel clear. But what about the collective? I've cleared my fears. What about our fears? I've cleared my anger. What about our anger? So why don't I just come back and participate a little bit? Why don't I stay around a little longer and participate a little bit? You know, it would behoove everybody if I can see the bigger picture. So there are times when we say to ourselves, I choose to be done with this, and my relationships, if a challenging relationship arises, we're too premature to cut them out. You might have to end a relationship. Generally speaking, I say it's when more harm than good comes from having that relationship. I don't care who it's with. I don't care if it's your own blood relatives or just your next door neighbor or friend. When more harm than good, when everything you're trying to say or do to help is still not getting anywhere, sometimes you kind of have to go, you know, I'm going to then go back and just be silent and go a different way. You never ever choose to judge the people that don't get it. You know they're going to get it at some point, but they may not be able to get the lessons through you, so you kind of have to wash your hands and walk away. But if you can see that you have karmic relationships, look for the lessons in them, look for the lessons, give thanks, and let them go. I don't mean just goodbye, meaning let go of any attachment after that. Try to look for your lessons and give thanks. But what about the other kind? Gifting relationships. Again, this is from good karma. This is work I've done, right? It's never just an accident. And if you see somebody that seems like they have more gifting relationships, you know, pay attention. Because, you know, if you say, I've got gifting relationships, aren't I amazing? You're missing it. You'll lose them. When you see them, give thanks, because gratitude is a frequency. It's an energy. And when you send that energy to other people saying thank you, even people that aren't even on the material planet anymore, they're getting that. It's almost like prayers, believe it or not. They can be 5 steps into the astral world on the other side. Your thank yous to them takes them and lifts them even higher into other frequencies. It may sound strange, but it does work. We don't just pray for the souls of the dearly departed. It's more than that. It's something bigger than that. Okay? It's gratitude. See, if I just say prayers for the departed, oh Jesus, baby Jesus, can you please look after my mom who passed away? You know, baby Jesus, thank you, baby Jesus, who's still in a manger somewhere and all that. And you're asking that prayers for this to be lifted. Well, it's nice that you're putting intentions, but you'll have 10 times, 100 times more effectiveness to help people who have passed over or still living on earth when you just acknowledge they've done good and you're grateful for it. Do you understand the difference? You don't just pray for them. Your gratitude is an active prayer experientially. It's not a pray to, pray for. It is the manifestation of the prayer. Just giving thanks already soothes, already lifts people, living or departed. So if you know that you've got a lack of these, if you see I've got gifting relationships, but there's still something that's snagging and I can't seem to manifest more, watch for old paradigms, watch for old belief systems, look inside and see if there's something in you that's still missing. Those old pieces that if you don't look, Saturn will eventually bring them around, usually in kind of a harsh fashion, usually in the form of, destroying relationships. Got your phone off? Good. And remember, lastly, integrate. Don't just give thanks. Integrate what you learned. Think of any gifting relationship you've ever had. And then integrate it. What can I learn from that wonderful person I had in my life? God, they were always so unconditionally loving. They were so supportive. Man, when I was in dark times, they were there. Not only go, thank you, person, also, how can I become more like that? Not in a way of idolatry for that. They were so wonderful. They were, but how can I become like that? Look for how your lessons can take you higher. That's called integration. So when things are not so good and karmic, I still need to breathe them in and look at what I might learn from it and then bid it farewell. But when they're not karmic and they're gifting relationships, still I have to breathe in what I can get from that, and it'll take everything to another level. Bless you. Now, moving on to, there are new relationships. All right? Once upon a time, we were told there's marriage. That's it. Everybody's straight. It's opposite genders. And once you do it, it's forever. If you don't do it, it's because you're cursed. And you know, but that's kind of the way it was looked at. You know, oh, poor her. She's never had a man come, you know, and now she's getting older. It was like, especially for women, it was like considered a curse. Really strange. But the church and others used to really emphasize this. You get married and you never break out of that marriage. And that wasn't real. It was never healthy and it was never real. It's nice that people coupled and became partners, but it was never good, healthy, or real to then take that and turn it into something of a shaming and guilt. So human beings got used to, there was marriage, but then they got used to, now I'm divorced. In my lifetime, my dad was nuts enough, meaning kind of a rude person enough, he used to forbid my mother to have any friends that were divorcees. He could have friends, guys were allowed to be divorced. She wasn't allowed to have any friends, female friends, that were divorced. That's how shunned it is in traditional families and or certain religious people, right? This is in my lifetime. So now, we look and we learn to adjust. I'm not just married. Some of us now say, I'm divorced. Divorced is not a failed marriage. Divorced is another category of relationship. Because it should be, I'm now having a relationship with me. Is that making sense? Divorce is not just non-married. It's its own category. And then we have another one that kicked into the world more prevalently, gay partnerships. I think that's great. Because everybody that's all tense about the other kind have to get used to something else. Too bad. You have any issues with that? Where are you going to draw the line? Okay, fine. I guess I'll have to accept gay relationships. But I do not, accept aliens from other planets having partnerships with humans. Wherever you draw the line is going to be something you have to meet later. Your children are going to become gay alien partners. Whatever's going to be a problem. And you know what you can do? You can speed this up. The pen disappeared from up here, but you can speed this. Just write it down. Write down all the things you don't like so that you can know ahead of time what's coming. I mean, that's all. Then you'll know what's coming. Oh, I just review, gay. One of your children's going to be gay. I just don't like this, then it's going to be that. Whatever. And because we always just meet ourselves. We have to confront ourselves and our issues. But that said, I do want to say that there is a new relationship that we need to announce to the world. It's not just married. It's not just gay marriage. It's not just having intimate lovers, intimate friends. Another category. There's a new relationship called the spiritual relationship. And some people even think that they know what that is and have a definition for it, and they're still not getting it. There is a new relationship, and this is really important and really, really exceedingly powerful for us all to understand. Just as the world brought us divorce, just as it brought us gay marriage, just as it brought us, intimate friendships that once would have been shunned just a generation ago, there's something else happening. It's what I would best call a new relationship. New relationship is not what we think it is. It's not like I can put it in a box and define it. It's where all of a sudden, and there are symptoms of this, which I'll name a few things, but we have erroneous names that we try to put to it. Some of us don't know you're in a new spiritual relationship. What's going on in your partnerships? What's happening for you? Well, I haven't really had a partnership for a while. Oh, then you're in a spiritual relationship. No, I'm in a loneliness relationship. I'm alone. See, you have false names for it. You think you're suffering from something when in fact you're waking up. But it's not acceptable yet. Just as gay relationships at a period, just in our generation and previous, it had all kinds of weird stigma and so forth. There was something wrong with you if you were gay. Now we understand it just is. It just is. It's another, here's this and now there's that, and it's just another, and we're all having relationships. This thing that many of us on the spiritual path are experiencing or suffering from in some cases is being mislabeled. There was never anything wrong when you were gay, and there's not anything wrong with you now that you don't know how to get a partnership. You're having a spiritual relationship. In a spiritual relationship, you're going to feel more interdependent. But then you're going to try to fit interdependent in with a relationship with somebody else. You're going to try to fit things together, blocks, a square block and a round hole, and it's not going to work. We've got to understand there's a new something. And I don't even know what it is. I don't know how to define it. I only know this. I meaning any one of us. I'm starting to feel like an interdependence. Oh, be careful, because if you become too interdependent, then you'll lose your codependence that allows you to be in a relationship. No, I don't know how to have interdependence and partnership because it's not been done. Or it's rare. I'm going to step into a whole new relationship. I can be gay, straight, divorced, or polyamorous. And still, those are all old school. I'm ready to step into new relationships. So that involves interdependence. Also, if I'm developing my spiritual relationship consciousness, it's going to mean spirituality is a priority to me. And notice the symptoms that I'm going to name are going to seem like obvious, but nobody's associating it with new relationship. They just think those are things that are happening. They're also defining where you're going in relationship. Just like if I'm a person, study a little, don't study a little spiritually, but if I'm highly codependent, it's going to define my relationship, isn't it? Well, it's the same thing. If you're developing interdependence, it's going to affect your partnerships, your relationships. But the interdependence allows me to focus on me and my consciousness. You're also going to find in this new relationship, the old compulsions aren't the same. Like have to have a lot of sex, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. There's no definition. Like when I started a while ago. The world's changing. Be careful not to try to lock in a definition, because then you'll lock yourself there. And you don't even know for how long. Because a door opens, you didn't walk through it. You walked up to it, good job. You didn't walk through it. You do not know when that door will open again. You could be stuck in your definition of yourself for lifetimes. Probably not, but it's a possibility. But you definitely will lock in for years if you don't walk through some doors. So the interdependence, I don't put an emphasis on some of the same old things. They don't have to live with me, or we don't have to have a lot of sex, or whatever else it happens to be. You know, we try out other relations. We're going, well, I've been healing for a while. You don't realize you're actually in a new relationship called spiritual relationship. And you think you've just kind of abstained from a relationship. Then you go and get into one and you go, without wanting to admit it, we start to go, well, I'm trying this out, but it's just not happening. Because you're in a different consciousness and you're still trying to date everyday people. And we don't know why that's not working. We think something must be wrong with it. And I have people come to me, Michael, am I being too selective? All kinds of wording. See that happen to you too? So we have all kinds of labels. Maybe I'm just being selective. No. What's happening is you are just rising into a level of consciousness, and unfortunately, people can't just fit in. If you want to just be an average human, there's lots of average humans that can resonate. But once you wake up or start waking up, you kind of can't look back. So, you try the dating. Okay, I'm just going to turn down the volume a little on my spirituality because that could turn the person off. Let me drop that down a notch. Now, let's go out and we'll walk, hand clasp, like we're supposed to, like we're still 5 or something, So we'll walk hand in hand and okay, well, thank you. Oh, an awkward moment. Are we supposed to hug, kiss? Pick you up tomorrow. Like, what is this? The spiritual relationship that's now ready for us to step into and help build and be built by is different. It's absolute clear. It's honesty. How are you feeling? What are you doing? What are you about? Well, I have to wait 15 and a half dates before I tell you some of my, personal. How do I settle for that? The spiritual relationship just doesn't have time to screw around. It doesn't have any interest in walking sideways. It's about forward. It's about onwards and upwards. Go vertical. It's about awakening. We just can't settle. And that will make you seem very impatient because you can't do it. And then you can't do it. And then it looks like something's wrong with you because your friends are still having intimate encounters all the time. That's because they're still messed up. They are. They're still messed up. They're still going to settle. But where are you at? You're not settling. So therefore you're not getting as much action or whatever. And that's a profound thing. It is. It's a profound thing. And I also believe that the spiritual relationship, the person that starts becoming, not a doing, a becoming, the person who starts to become the presence of spiritual relationship also starts to find that they can see far much more love in everybody. And then you get really confused. Well, I'm loving everyone. Now, if I love everyone and I feel this tremendous love, and I even see sparkles in their aura and their energy, and I feel a oneness with all, it changes. Like, you can't do the old way. You don't look at everybody and go, wow, there's this sense of blissful oneness. I want to do you. It just doesn't. The mind can't do that because there's this feeling. What happens instead is the opposite. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What are we supposed to? Do we sleep together? Do we marry? What are we supposed to do? And it becomes so confusing. Everybody ends up in this quandary and not knowing how to keep going. And they shame themselves and wrong, men and women. They shame themselves, they wrong themselves because it's so different. One thing that happens a lot in these kinds of situations is a bit of transference. Because we're waking up, we can't settle on the old, and we know that the average person in our average town or city is probably not awakened, and you're not going to settle, you're not going to go, you don't want to really revert to old ways, and if you do, not very smart. So what are you going to do instead? You're going to say, I want to step into this. Now, where do I find someone at this level? And because it's so confusing, and it shifts moment to moment, that a lot of times we do transference. Spiritual teachers, falling in love with the spiritual teachers, whether it's your author, whether it's your life coach, whatever it is. Transference starts to increase. Even though we're learning interdependence, transference increases. We're learning healthiness and boundaries and self-awareness, but we still fall prey to that thing of codependence called transference. Why? It totally makes sense. Because I cannot settle anymore. So now I'm only going to have admiration and love, even desire and affection for really awakened individuals. You see what's happening? Your job is to see that person as your next step. In other words, you integrate what you see in them. You don't try to attach to it, because then you're like the nuns who used to marry themselves to Jesus. Balance is good. Admire the Christ, admire Jesus. What does it mean to marry yourself? Well, if I were doing it, I would say I'm going to marry myself to that level of love and integrity. It's a concept, not a person. And I hear those kinds of things a lot, and I hear them lately for whatever reason. A lot of folks reaching out saying, I feel some feelings. What is this about? The ones that insist on making it about me or about someone else in their life, that's very sad, because that means they refuse to go to the next level that's calling to them. But the ones that can say, oh my God, I get it. The admiration that I have for so-and-so is actually me. It's actually a reflection of where I can go inside my own consciousness. That's called responsibility. And I think it's profound. But there's a lot of that goes on. A lot of this fixation on others. There's a lot of people that do the fixation on Mary Magdalene and say, I want to be like Magdalene and have a Jesus. You have to be a better you first. Don't focus on, I want to be just like Magdalene, who I believe, let some people say, I believe she was betrothed to, partnered with Jesus or whatever. All we're doing then is setting out there this unattainable goal. I want to be like these other spiritual people. Just become your version of spirituality. You become, if you think Mary Magdalene was an amazing being, how do you become more like her? Tell me that. Don't tell me how you're going to one day marry her. Don't tell me how you once upon a time you were her. I can't tell you how many people were Mary Magdalene. Man. I mean, it's crowded in there, And I'm not dissing, because I know some people have a very heartfelt belief in that. Actually, I'm not dissing that. I actually believe that not only is it a historic character, there is an archetype that is Magdalene. An archetype, a consciousness that represents what she came to understand. People actually feel an affinity to the archetype and they think it's her, which is transference. Sometimes it isn't that. Sometimes they actually were very close to her. Very close to her. But not necessarily her. They could have been, followers. They could have been students. They could have been whatever. But we confuse those things. These are archetypes. You can say, I would love a relationship like, but you have to find your own version. If you want to be like Jesus, does that mean you should hang out with 12 other guys and wear a white robe? That's a little literal, isn't it? So when you say you want to be like Jesus or you want to be like Christ, do not take it literally. He would never advise that to you. By the same token, in relationship, don't take a relationship and inflate it so high that it's unattainable. That's not healthy to you or to anybody else. How can I integrate that thing? How can I integrate that consciousness that I see before me? So we might have to accept being different. We might have to accept being alone. You're going to need to fast from the old versions of relationships, but that doesn't mean you're alone. And then we start to say, well, okay, I get it. Michael's saying we have to become really spiritual. And so we think that involves abstinence. Just remember to raise the bar in terms of your integrities. You don't have to go without. Do you know that most people in the spiritual work, most people in the New Thought work have done this before? Did that ever occur to anybody? Do you know that a great percentage of people in a room like this have been priests or nuns before? We've done this before. We've worked in monasteries or temples or whatever it happens to be. We've done this work, guys. But on the spiritual path in the old days, it often involved abstinence and poverty, especially with some traditions. So we're sitting in this room going, God, I want to work on prosperity issues. You have to own that we've taken vows of poverty. You can't just try to create more when in fact you have vows that say you have to be broke or you're not spiritual. And what about the pleasure of intimacy? Again, we know we've done fixations on it in this and other lives, and we've done abstinences on this. Neither of those is our path today. Our best path today is to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. What is this for? What am I going to do with this intimacy? And I'm not just doing a talk today. This is important stuff. This is really, really important for us to understand. There's nothing wrong with you. But stop labeling things inappropriately or incorrectly. You're not just not having sex. You're not just alone. You're actually having an awakening spiritual relationship, which often involves living differently. Your integrities rise, so you're not settling. So now, and then does it mean one only? No, I can have a few intimate friends. But how I do it, the bar of that is going to raise. My level of honesty about it, my level of love, my level of clarity. And if I find myself slipping into selfishness, I need to see that. You know, we need to be like people who have gone through a 12-step program, you know, 12 steps from relationships or something. We need to fast from all the old versions of this and then say, what is the new version? And if you say it's just like the old, what was the purpose? There's something new happening, I'm telling you. There's something new happening. And we're walking into it, and there's been nobody to show the way. I can't even give an exact demonstration or label for it because we don't want to label it. Well, I can give hints, but I can't, and I don't want to say, here's exactly what new relationship looks like, because then it starts to become old. Yeah. Instead, just let it keep opening. I give you some hints and this and that, but let's let it keep opening. One of the last things on that is that I can see in people. I can see the sadness, the confusion, more confusion than anything. What am I doing, Michael? Where's my partnership, Michael? Where am I going to go? Am I dying alone? The spiritual you doesn't know exactly what to do with the ego you, because the spiritual you is saying, God, this is amazing. I'm actually complete as I am. The ego is going, how can you say you're complete when you don't have a partner? And the spiritual one should go, I heard that the last 1,000 times you told me, you just don't get it. I'm okay. And then the ego self says, I'm going to have your mother call. Wait till she calls. She'll tell you there's something wrong with you, you know, if you're doing anything different than what she likely did. It's all, you know, it's a lie. And so we have to learn to say no to those voices that are coming from that old garbage. The voices that are not God. Even if they think they're God. Even if they profess to be the latest, greatest, highest understanding. If it isn't God, the ego is going to adversely react to it. It's going to try to make you think something's wrong with you. So keep that in mind. And I can say this much for me personally. It's kind of strange because I feel like I can do this kind of relationship and still be in spirit. I can do that. I can do none at all. I feel pretty good that and so if you want to know if you're there, just ask yourself that question. If you say, I'm fine, but I really would wish this, then you're still unraveling. You want to know if you're there? Truly, honestly assess. Are you just as okay alone as with a partner? Can you be with one person? Can you date two people? Where are your parameters? Where are the doors shut? And when you can say, I really feel like whatever I do and wherever I go, I can feel love's presence. Just as those birds outside will find flowers and sing, and they're just living the bliss. Lilies of the field was Jesus' metaphor. How can you be in a relationship consciousness or category of topic and be like the lilies of the field? And no, I'm not talking about a licentiousness towards just free sex or free living. I'm talking about presence and being at peace with where you are. Ask yourself where you are and how you feel about it. If it's anything, then I feel pretty good, man. I feel really good. Then that's where the work has to be done. But when you do the work, you're going to see more and more gifting relationships and yet not attaching to them. You're just giving thanks for them. Because the way you do things is going to be different. And as I was saying, in my life, I see a lot of that. I see the loneliness and I see the difficulty and the struggle with people. Now, I can share this with you and you may not understand it. And I've never shared this with anybody before, anybody in my life. But there is a certain amount of me that has chosen consciously to not go into full commitment of relationship. And one reason is because I feel like I just feel called to stay in the mix with everybody. It feels like if I just go, well, I'm just going to go ahead and choose a partnership, a full-on committed partnership, that it makes people think that that's the goal they have to go to. Did that just make sense, what I just said? It makes them think, well, oh, there's that spiritual teacher and he has this, so we're supposed to go. So I choose not to do it so I can stay in the mix and let people know, be comfortable where you are. And some people would say to me, wow, that's amazing you do that. Others would say, that's total codependence, Michael. You should be going into the relationship you deserve and you want. I've heard it all right in here. Because I've never shared this with anybody, I didn't have to. Anything anybody could say for support of this theory of mine or out of support of it and judging it, I've already heard all those opinions in my own head. And it took me years and years and years to walk it, move it, adjust with it, talk it, expand it, look at the contractions and just keep going and then come to the understanding. Just pretty much, that's me. Everything's about the greater good. And I've heard the voice saying, yeah, but you know what? You deserve. I had a temptation a while back to talk to the chaplains here in one of our circles. I almost did it. I almost said, chaplains, could you guys give me, and this is going to sound strange, can you guys give me permission to have a relationship? I almost said those words to them. And I caught myself before I said it because I knew I could still resolve that within myself. It would have been fine to ask them. And I know what they would have said. Michael, we love and support you. Absolutely. You know, you deserve that sort of thing. That's not what I needed to ask. And that's not what I needed them to say. Because I hadn't yet even come to the full understanding of my acceptance of what I'm doing and why. Is that making sense? So think about what you're doing. Think about why you're doing it. Why you're in relationship, why not? And are you comfortable with it? If I wanted to be in one, I know that the people that know me would fully support that. If I chose not to be in a committed situation, I know they would fully support that. But what's also important is for them to know that I think those thoughts and I work them through my mind to do the highest good or to do the best. Never flippant, never something rash, never something compulsive and addictive. They can pretty much count on me definitely thinking these things through or feeling them through. So coming towards a close, not only is there new relationship, there's new spirituality. So new spirituality. The old school is fastly fading away. And then we have things called new thought churches, unity, religious science, new thought. New thought churches are already old thought. They're newer than old, but they're the old new thought churches. There's still structure, and there's still judgment, and there's still opinions, and so on. But if a person's looking, you know, what would I like to do? I'm going to call this a pyramid of spirituality. You just decide where you're at. There's a pyramid of spirituality, just like there is in dating and relationships. Where we would like to be is at the highest, but notice it's lonely at the top. If I'm moving my consciousness higher and higher up the pyramid of relationship, there's less people to hang out with up there. So complain about it, real good. Then just drop down to the base of the pyramid and date everybody down there, all the rocks at the base of the pyramid. But if you want to get to the top of the pyramid, you have to accept there's less building blocks up there, less people. So decide what you want and then own it. But also in spirituality. At the base of the pyramid, you have no spirituality, just people that are just granite brains, you know, just rock minds. There's no interest in spirituality. Is that where you want to hang out? Is that your spirituality? No. So we go to another level. We're going to go from the no spirituality to dabbling a little. And these people are amazed at themselves. Oh, no, I have spirituality. In college, I did a class on Buddhism. And then, I read a book on Lao Tzu. Yeah, I heard some of Jesus' quotes. That's the next level. There are people that are doing a little dabbling. They'll be impressed with their dabbling, but it's still just dabbling. Then there's people that go and commit. No dabbling, now they commit to something. To a religion or a thought system. Buddhism, I don't care what you call it. Buddhism, shamanism, Catholicism. You're still into now a religion which is higher than the dabbling and higher than the nothing. But now you're committed, which is good, but to a thing. Okay? And that will be your thing for a while. And you think that it's the only one, and you're really impressed again with yourself. Then you move up another notch, and that's where you start to synthesize what you study. Not dabble. You start taking the things you learned and also the things you devoted to, and you start synthesizing them, and that's really high. Because now you look at the commonality between this and that. You don't judge them and fault them with each other. You start to say, man, I can see where it all comes together, right? That's really great. Now you're past the midpoint of spiritual studies. If you're there, I hope most of you could say you're at least at that point. And that's fantastic. Next comes, after synthesis, is mysticism. Because instead of just synthesizing the teachings, you start to become the teachings. It's more experiential. See, synthesizing could still be a little of the head, a little bit of this and that. Mysticism is, it all suddenly locks in. Like, you now start to have experiences of spirit and the light. Notice that we're a couple notches above religion, though, and we're way above, people that just want to dabble. So last but not least, there's this thing called Christ consciousness. That's the top of the pyramid. It's the top, not Christianity. Christ consciousness means I am now awakening the divine in myself and seeing the divine in others. Not the gratuitous seeing the divine that we sometimes say we're doing. Oh, beloved, the divine in me honors the divine in you. That could just be something we recite. Christ consciousness means I actually understand the presence of God in mankind. So think about where you are in this pyramid, let's say. Again, this is not comparing Jesus or Christianity at the top to other religions down below. Christianity's down there with all the other religions. After that comes synthesis, after that comes mysticism, and after that comes the total awareness, the total understanding, the total presence of Christ consciousness. It starts to awaken. When that starts to happen, and in mysticism too to a degree, when that happens and you get to mysticism and Christ consciousness, that becomes the teacher. All of a sudden, Spirit talks to us. All of a sudden, we have direct downloads. I'm not saying any of the other levels are a problem. I'm just saying there's a difference between them. All of a sudden, we realize, God, so now putting it in context with new relationships. New relationships fit those higher realms of consciousness, of spiritual consciousness, new religion, new spirituality. All of a sudden, I'm in a relationship, but I'm a mystic. If I reach that level, I'm more like into mysticism. Mysticism, religions which are only halfway up the pyramid, all foundational or structural, fundamental religions, all of them diss sexuality, for example. They all diss it. It's an evil, and you only do it to procreate and create more people in that religion so they can have more followers. Okay? That's religion. That's religion. That's not the level we're all meant to be at, right? So the religion says shame, but you know what? All forms of mysticism, which have strains of those religions, all the mystical traditions do the opposite. They actually support sexuality as a new thing, to do it differently than you did before. So one's down here saying shame on you, the other one's going, wow, you don't know what you're missing. Now, what does that tell you? If there's a pyramid and pyramids are higher at the top and religion's down here shaming something and mysticism's higher up and it embraces it, what do you think that's saying? Go with the higher, man. Why would you settle? So just using these models can teach us all kinds of new understanding. Where are you in spirituality? The new spirituality is Christ consciousness. That's where we're going. It's a very difficult thing to describe because people, as soon as they hear Christ, think I'm talking about a religion. It's awakening the I am divine presence of God within us. It's not even going to be mysticism where I have occasional, mystical experiences with God, although most people haven't even had that, of course. There's one more after that, but go wherever you are. Don't try to get to the top yet. Just go higher if you can. And don't try to date someone and make them the top. Just date them and try to see if the relationship can move up the ladder of consciousness. See if the person can go from being just a common person you meet to someone who's interesting, to somebody who you develop a friendship, to somebody you develop intimacy. Develop it. Grow the relationship. But also grow the new spirituality. That's why, guys, it looks like relationships are failing and falling apart. Because we're birthing a new one. And it looks like religions. I deal with a lot of them. I travel a lot. And as I'm coming to a close, somebody said to me, Michael, do you know any masters anymore? I know all the spiritual teachers. I've met them all. I've been around all the traditions. And you would think you'd find some. But they're not there. Yogananda was one. Peace Pilgrim was one. The awakened meaning. People that actually had it and applied it. They're gone. I can't tell you anybody that I know alive that truly not only has this so-called claimed consciousness, but lives it. You should see the behaviors of some of the spiritual teachers behind the curtains. It's amazing. Now, mind you, some of that you can't be taken out of context. You got to be careful. If you hear a spiritual teacher telling their child on the phone, no, you have to go to bed, you can go, oh, I thought because they're spiritual, they would say, well, whatever your guides tell you, honey. That's not, so don't take it out of context. You should hear some of the things I say once in a while, and if people took it out of context, they'd think I'm a real nutcase, because I'll just jokingly say things, and if somebody heard some of those things, they'd go, whoa. But you got to know me. I'm going to say some pretty weird things now and then, and just silly things. Oh, I guess you have seen that. Sorry. But I believe Kenneth Wapnick, see, they don't always have to look like mystics. Kenneth Wapnick, this skinny kind of intellectual guy with his thick glasses and all, totally cool. That guy he's the foremost authority on A Course in Miracles. He was one of the editors, primary editor, and that guy had it together. And one thing that impressed me? It wasn't just the fact that he knows the Course forward and backward. It's that when other so-called Course teachers, that had this imbecilic kind of behavior to judge and try to attack him, he never bothered with them. He just not interested. He wouldn't do conferences with them. He wouldn't get involved. And I loved that he didn't get tangled into it. He would say, this is it. Enough is enough. And he'd just cut it off. I loved how centered and beautiful that guy was because he knew the Course, but he lived it. There's other people that say they know the Course or similar teachings, and they don't live it. So I'm just saying it's in a weird kind of a way, and this is important, the few masters we once could have seen, the Yoganandas, the Plato and whomever, that we once can say existed, I don't see many, if any at all, on this planet today. But what I see is humble spiritual people who impress me more than the so-called teachers. And what do you think that means? Same. In relationships, we're developing new relations, and in spirituality, new spirituality. It's going to happen in you or in anybody else. It's not going to be just the teachers. Too often the teachers are failing the litmus test of applying their spirituality. We have a job, all of us on this planet, to say, we're not looking for that anymore because it's not going to be there, and then it crushes us. It makes us go, I thought this person was spiritual, they're not, and now I'm not going to be spiritual anymore because they turned me off. Don't do that. Become what they failed to become. Do what they failed to do. I've had a lot of friends, spiritual teachers as friends, that I knew, that I worked, colleagues and so on. Years ago and current, a lot of them. And there's a point where I just feel like God, what a bummer. I would love to have maintained a relationship with them, but when I see them drifting too far off, and an inability to own that they drift off. If they could just own it, that's okay. But the inability to own it, then I start to just like everybody else. I just start to love everyone and see them just as spiritual as anybody else, which is great. So I start to see the light everywhere instead of in those couple of individuals I would have hoped I would have been able to, see a little bit better behaviors. So remember, as I close, new relationships, new spirituality. The world is changing, and that's not just a cool philosophical statement. Wow, the world is changing. Wow, there's new vibrations. You better watch it. It's in your relationships, it's in your spirituality, and in other areas. We could go on with other topics. There's new diet, there is new body metabolism. Everything's changing. So start getting used to looking at the new in your life. Don't be shocked, don't be dismayed. Look at how maybe it's just part of the new. Right? Maybe some of the foods that became toxic to you have become such because there's a new you, physiologically. So be advised. It's not all the foods are bad, it's maybe you're good. All right? Please take a few centering breaths while we share a nice deep experience. It'll be a brief meditation only, but very, very good. Very profound. Set aside all the thoughts of the world. A couple centering breaths going right into the core, the silent place within. It's not the place of doing, it's the place of being. It's a nice, quiet center. And as I share this idea with you, do your best to imagine it and integrate it. One day maybe we'll do a talk just on this idea. Every single time you meet someone, the initial inspiration to meet them came from God. Try to imagine this and get this feeling. Even when you said hello, the very inspiration behind saying hello came from God. The inspiration behind making love to your partner always comes from God, not the actions. The original inspiration always starts in God. Think about this, that every time you even smiled at someone, before it became a smile, there was an inspiration to smile. Before you become pregnant and or have a child, there's an inspiration from God. God is constantly speaking to us, trying to get through to us. God is always an inspiration behind everything. When you put words and actions to it, we usually lose that original inspiration. So take a moment to look at your day-to-day life and imagine, before you waved at somebody, before you lifted your hand to wave, an inspiration from God said, there is God in you ready to join with God in them, and it wants to say hello or smile. But before you took the action, it was God only. Before you made love, it was actually God before it became the action. Before you go to eat something, the desire to eat, the desire deep inside, first was an inspiration from God, but it wasn't for food. It was only ever to join in union with God. Like saying, there's God compartmentalized in your little body, and as soon as you desire to reach out to another, it's the desire to break the compartments down and join with them. With that in mind, look over your life and see anything you do, to shower, use the toilet, to eat, before it became a thing, there was God calling, God reaching out. Look at how many times a day that happened, and look at how many times a day we interpreted it, misinterpreted it, or drifted it into something else. The lesson in part is, how can I stay in that zone and still do things? How do I prevent myself from shifting from an inspiration that is clearly there? We know that's God, even if we don't know it in our head. Just tune into it. Life, inspiration is always God. But look how often and how quickly I misinterpret it. How far do I go drifting into my misinterpretation? You see someone, and instead of a smile to you, they give you a look of anger, hatred. Look how quickly it takes you out of your original inspiration to commune with them. Obviously, it's not easy to maintain that center, but let's just start to see it. Let's start to recognize it as potentially missed opportunities. How can I be and maintain being the presence of God in such circumstances? And let's feel a commitment to it. More and more my life is going to become living in the center. More and more my diet, more and more my friendships, living in the center. I would love and I embrace and I call upon all to come to me and join me. But there are going to be people that don't want to join you. In your mind, still hold them in the light with you. See, never exclude anyone in heart, in consciousness. But you might have to say goodbye to some externally. See it for what it is and refuse to lose them in the heart. Love. Behind every action of every human being, it started as a love inspiration, and it just got twisted by how much ego was in the person. Begin soaking that in more and more, and begin giving thanks quietly that you're getting that, you understand that, and you're choosing to be that presence behind everything. Even to reach for a bottle of alcohol, it's not the reaching, nor is it the bottle. Something inside called to us, and then we didn't respond to it from love to love. We went from love to fear, then the fear took a different action. We get this, we see this, we accept our part in this, and we surrender all that is unlike God to the heart of God, to be transformed, to be transmuted. And then we arise to a new level of commitment and clarity. And so it is.
And so it is.